Welcome to Feed the Kids, Not the Pests, effective IPM for cafeterias and kitchens. This is Dr. Marcia Anderson with the Center for School IPM. I have the pleasure of being your moderator for today's program. I would first like to thank you all for joining us. Today's webinar will review IPM tactics that can reduce the presence of pests in your school cafeterias and kitchens. We'll show you how to consider sanitation in these areas from a pest point of view. Protecting the health of children is a priority for the Environmental Protection Agency. Children face increased risks to their health when they are unnecessarily exposed to pests and pesticides. For this reason, EPA recommends that all schools implement programs that promote the safe use of pesticides and integrated pest management. By developing a coordinated IPM program, school leaders demonstrate their commitment to promoting a healthy environment where students are more productive. Effective pesticide safety and IPM programs address not only the safety concerns of using pesticides, but also the causes of why pests are in our schools. I now have the pleasure of introducing our speakers for today's webinar. We'll begin with Mr. Mark Harden. Mark is an IPM specialist with the Howard County Public School System in Maryland. He has over 20 years of experience implementing IPM programs in sensitive environments. Next, we will have Allison Tazy Allen. Allison is the Director of Certification with the National Pest Management Association, where she manages their Quality Pro programs. She is a board-certified entomologist with degrees in both teaching and entomology. And our final presenter will be Carrie Windeal Rojas. Carrie is the Associate Director for Urban and Community IPM with the University of California. She oversees the state's urban IPM educational materials and website. At this point, I would like to ask Mark to begin our overview of IPM in schools, cafeterias, and kitchens. Mark, it's all yours.
Thank you, Marcia. I'd like to welcome everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. Integrated pest management is important in schools, but before we get into some of the specifics, I thought it was really important that we sort of lay the groundwork for what IPM is. It's not really new. It's been around for centuries, and it's common sense, really, and using the biology of the pests and applying that to pest control. It emphasizes non-chemical methods, but it's not exclusive of pesticides, because pesticide use is important, but it is limited. It's EPA recommended, as Marcia has just said. It's inconsistent in its definition and application. And what I mean by that is that many different areas of pest control define it differently. There are parts of it that are consistent and many that are added or taken out as needed. Many states, including all the mid-Atlantic region where I'm from, require IPM in schools. I wanted to start out by sort of talking about some of our common pests in kitchens. And they're the same kind of pests you might find in other areas. Ants, in our area, we have, a lot of different species. The primary ones are odorous house and pavement ant. In other parts of the country, this may be very different. You may have many different species depending on your geography. There's many different kinds of flies, and one of our speakers today is going to speak directly on many of these species. But, the thing about them is that their food source is very different. So you're going to have a start as to where to look for them once you get started. Cockroaches, German, brown-banded, American, Oriental, these probably are species you have wherever your school is located. And they're going to be a problem. Many of them are introduced artificially. Some of them are peridomestic. They actually will live outside during part of the season and move in during another part. And then you have your occasional invaders, things like millipedes, spiders, snakes, other insects and animals that might come in underneath doors, might come through defects in the facility. But these animals aren't really there after the food. They just happen to end up in your facility, in your kitchen, in your cafeteria. And lastly, mice. Again, this is somewhat species dependent, but there's some species which are going to be found pretty much everywhere. Starting with mice, I'm not going to go into a lot of really specifics here, but just to give you sort of an idea of how you would start thinking about IPM in your facilities. If you look in the lower left, we have an entry point. A mouse has chewed through a spot where we had foamed earlier. Obviously, that was ineffective. But if you can limit the entry points, your mice are not going to be able to get into your facility. They also need a place to hide. And in the center slide, we have a mouse here that it actually got electrocuted inside of a motor. And you're going to find them hiding in motors. They're not going to be sitting in the middle of your kitchen waiting for you to trap them. They're going to be hiding inside things. So what are those hide places? And again, most of the time you're going to trap them out. That's going to be the best and most effective way to get rid of them once they're there. And that means you have to know how to trap, where to trap. And what are you going to do with the traps when you're done with them? Are they going to throw the whole trap out? Are staff people going to remove the mouse and reset them? Do they know how to reset them? All these kinds of questions need to be answered if you're going to have an effective IPM program. Ant species, again, there's many different species, but almost every ant species you're going to find inside have scout ants. And there's the one or two ants that are going to come in. They're going to start looking for food. And if you look in the upper right, we have a defect in a window, and the ants have come in, and they found the candy that was left there that wasn't cleaned up in time. And these ants aren't going to stay there once they're done with that candy. They're going to go looking for more. If we didn't have the resource there to start with, the ants would not have stayed. On the bottom left, we have entry points from the outside. Ants are going to come in. They're going to go through very small gaps in your exterior of your buildings. Those can be sealed up, believe it or not. And on the lower right, we have an entry point on the inside. This is a wall looking down at the floor and the dirt that's been brought out by ants as they tunneled. If we can seal these up, we can get rid of the ants in our facilities. We eliminate about 70% of our ant problems by sealing up entry points. Occasional invaders. How are they getting in? Usually under your door or when the door is open. And you can see we have spiders and snakes on the right. We have crickets and beetles and all kinds of things on the left on a glue board that was left way too long. But these invaders are things that get in. They're still going to be a problem, but they're not going to get into our food, and we want to eliminate their entry points so they can't come in. Okay, so we've covered sort of the animal pests in a very brief way. But what really is the cause of the pests problems in schools? It's not really the animals. It's things like poor sanitation. If we're doing sanitation properly, we don't have food for them to come for. If we're storing our food properly, again, they're not going to have anything to eat once they get in and they're going to leave. We need staff participation in our IPM program. If we have ineffective training, our staff aren't going to be able to help us out. And we need to not allow free and frequent movement of pests. We need to have our doors so that they are equipped with proper door sweeps. We need exterior integrity so that there's no openings and gaps for the pests to come in. Lastly, we don't want to introduce our pests artificially or unintentionally. Maybe you have a warehouse that has an issue and you're bringing in your pests when you bring in your supplies. Maybe people are bringing things from home and inadvertently bringing in pests into your kitchens and your cafeterias. Or maybe you're moving equipment around and doing so, again, the animals are hiding there. You're bringing them into your schools. We don't want any of that to happen. So if we take a look at one of those sort of areas and we look at trash bag use, maybe not something you think of as part of the IPM program. But if we use trash bags inside, like in the upper right, we never have food waste inside of the containers in our school. And in the dumpsters up in the upper left, we have bags that are sealed up, and there's no food inside of the dumpster. There's nothing for them to get when they come there. Is that important? Yeah, I think it really is, because it's attracting them to your school. You need to use it wherever you have food waste. Kitchens, cafeterias, teachers' lounges, break rooms, custodial offices, and classrooms. We should never have a situation like the lower left where you have trash from food outside of a bag and it's going to get your dumpsters dirty on the inside. So outside trash management involves things like recycling in the upper right slide. We use them for putting our paper in, for putting our cans in, but the neighbor may not. So you need to make sure that those dumpsters are clean on the inside as well. This will greatly impact your interior pest levels. Things like rodents and stinging insects in particular will be attracted to them, and then they'll find their way in. Dumpsters ought to be on concrete pads. You ought to have good sanitation around the dumpsters. It's really important for your IPM program. Trash bag use is critical, but if your dumpsters are overloaded, like in the upper right, you're still going to have entry into that. Crows and things like raccoons are going to come along, they're going to rip them open, and then you're going to start all over again with a problem inside your dumpsters. A proper pickup schedule will solve that so that you don't have that problem. You shouldn't allow pests to enter our schools. We shouldn't be propping doors open. If you have drain covers, they ought to be complete. If you have pipe chases, as in the bottom slide or image, those should be sealed up, both going to the exterior and between rooms, even the ceilings or wherever they go through walls. This keeps your pests in certain areas so that you can control them much easier. We need to get our staff involved in IPM programs. Kitchen staff have to maintain a very high level of sanitation. That's part of their job. They also need to keep the kitchens free of harborages. They also need to eliminate water and food sources for pests. They need to have a way to report the problem, either in a logbook, reporting it to custodial, your IPM staff, or to the maintenance staff at your schools. We need to manage the kitchen waste properly, again, using trash bags, making sure that the food's removed at the end of the day. And they need to work with the IPM staff to maintain integrity of the traps and monitors that are placed. So if they're doing cleaning up, they're mopping, they're not snapping your traps and just leaving them, they're getting reset and they're in the proper places. It's a total team engagement. You need to train the custodial staff in IPM. You need to train your kitchen staff in IPM. Involving kitchen staff and custodial staff through their official duties is very important. You need to make IPM part of their work program. It needs to be part of their duties. That way it's not an extra add-on. It's not something they do afterwards. It's something they get evaluated on. And then lastly, involving all staff and students in reporting pests and keeping their own areas clean, like their lockers and their desks, will really help your IPM program to thrive. Your contractor or your IPM staff, whoever's responsible for the primary functions in IPM, they need to provide monthly monitoring of facilities. Placing monitors and non-chemical devices is important, identifying potential and existing problems and reporting those to the school staff, and then getting into some logbooks so everyone can find out what the problems are. Lastly, they need to be able to report calls between scheduled visits. If they come out 1 month, 2 days later there's a mouse in the school, they need to be able to come back out. You need to provide recommendations leading to exclusion, sanitation, and cultural solutions like we've been talking about. And they need to recommend and carry out approved pesticide treatments. This should not be done by school staff. It should be done by licensed pesticide applicators. So how do we control pests without pesticides in IPM? We do it through exclusion. We do it through sanitation, removing and trapping the animals, through changing human and pest behavior, keeping the pests out, and allowing the humans to be part of our IPM program. We need to eliminate water, harborage, and food. Those three things are what all life needs. If you can eliminate one, they're not going to stay. And lastly, we need to eliminate those causal pest issues that we've talked about. Well, thank you for giving me a few minutes to talk about the generalization of some of the things we do in IPM. And now we're on for some more specific talks from some other speakers.
Mark, thank you very much for your comprehensive introduction to the problems of pests in kitchens and cafeterias. Next, we would like to call on Allison Allen from the NPMA, who will go deeper into the management of pest control in kitchens. Allie, take it away.
Thank you very much. Just a quick confirmation that you can hear me.
Yes.
Wonderful. All right, thank you for welcoming me to present some of the details of an IPM program. And for those of you on the line, I have a challenge to hopefully engage you with the slides. Not too much multitasking going on your side. There are going to be 4 pictures that Mark showed in his presentation for areas that are really pest vulnerable areas that are also going to occur in my presentation. And that duplication is something that should just magnify the importance of focusing on those areas in your pest management program. We don't want to be redundant, but it also drives home the point that this is not rocket science, that there's just a few key areas that you can really focus on and make clean and sanitary and have a huge impact on your pest management program. So out of my chunk of the presentation here today, I want to make sure you have the tools and the language to use to motivate others to be part of this process. As Mark said, it is a team effort, and different parts of your IPM program are going to fall into the responsibilities of different folks within the school team. So I want to make sure you can motivate folks to do their part. I want you to be able to describe the process for integrated pest management. Again, as Mark said, there are a number of definitions, but I'm going to propose the one that helps me think about it. List the pest vulnerable areas in kitchens and cafeterias, and know how to inspect and monitor for pests in kitchens and cafeterias. It's to do a fantastic inspection and place monitors in a really educated way. It does take years of experience and training, but you can start here today and work with a pest management professional to learn what they've learned so that you can have effective inspection and monitoring practices in your school. So first and foremost, that motivational factor, even if cleaning up isn't super, just the thought of keeping things neat and tidy isn't motivating, thinking about the results of what happens when you don't clean up is what we focus on with IPM. So here is up close and personal with two of our pests that happen in school and cafeteria environments, and they're flies and cockroaches. And just take a moment and look these things in the face. You probably haven't seen a fly this close up. The picture on the right-hand side is a fly regurgitating, which flies do. You may have noticed little spots on walls. Well, before it became a spot, it was that little drop of fly vomit. And you really don't want that on anything to do with food that is going to be served to children. The photo in the middle, that is a fly's mouth part. They have these sponging mouth parts, and anything that they land on, they're going to sponge up and take a little bit of, and then they're going to go land on something else and do that regurgitation and sponge again. And so they basically act as little germ transfer stations. And that's what we want to think of pests as, the little germ sources. And hopefully that's a motivational factor to get folks to do their part in IPM. The photo on the left is close-up of cockroach legs, all that surface area that germs can hold on to, and anything that cockroach runs over, it's going to pick up and transfer to the next area. So when we think about pest and food safety, there are biological threats, there are chemical threats, and physical threats. Biological threats is really the one, E. coli, just all the germs that can be spread around. Salmonella is another one that comes to mind. Chemical threats, an example of that would be the improper use of disinfectants and pesticides and all of the cleaning agents and chemicals that we use in the environment. So it's really important to only put those chemical tools in the hands of a professional who knows how to use them responsibly. And then physical threats. We do use different materials to do exclusion and trapping and monitoring in integrated pest management. And you want to make sure you're placing those tools in places where they're not going to jeopardize food safety, especially with your monitoring devices. The placement of the fly traps that attract via light, which I think our next presenter is going to go into a little bit. You don't want to be placing those somewhere that's going to result in the flies dropping in or pieces of that getting into the food. Just one example. So take a moment as you're there, and I won't be touching my screen so I don't screw up the presentation, but go ahead and use your finger and look at your screen and point to 3 areas in this school kitchen where you think you might find that cockroach that's on the left or on the right there. Everyone's going to have a different answer. Obviously, I can't see where you're pointing on your screen, but just to kind of get you thinking about where the pest vulnerable areas would be from the perspective of a cockroach. Where would you like to hang out if you were a cockroach? Some common themes you're probably pointing at, maybe behind that the paper towel dispenser. Over there, there's water right there. It would be a nice spot to wedge behind. The oven where it's warm. Over by the bread stand where there's food available. Maybe that shelving, that the rolling cart that has the bread on it has hollow legs, and you like to hang out as a cockroach up inside of those legs. I mean, there's just limitless spaces to thrive, and we're going to be focusing in a little bit more on that now. The themes that you want to be thinking in no matter what pest you're looking for and looking to target in your integrated pest management program, you kind of want to put on that pest perspective and think about where would I get my food, where would I get my water, where would I find shelter, and how would I get into this environment. If you can answer those questions about your target pest, you'll be able to focus your control efforts much more carefully, and the more focused we are, the more responsibly we'll be using our time and our resources in our integrated pest management program. So going back to an example that Mark gave, the mice there, food, depending on the season, they may be going for different types of food to fulfill their nutritional requirements. They're mammals like us. So you want to know what are your mice liking to eat. Chances are if you find them eating something in the cafeteria, that's what they're going for. So use that as a bait. Water, mice actually get most of their water metabolically, so they don't need an open water source. So focusing your efforts on water isn't going to have a huge impact on your mice population. Other pests, it will. Shelter, if you're a mouse, you want it to be warm. So you could almost use an infrared thermometer to look at warm areas within your kitchen and have a pretty educated guess on where the mice are going to be attracted. And then a way in, just knowing what size hole. For example, if a pencil can fit underneath the door, a mouse can squeeze under there. So knowing about your pest, this presentation is not going to go into the detail of specific pests. Something's going on with the presentation. There we go. Of specific pests, but that mouse example is just an idea of the depth of knowledge that is required to really focus in your efforts. But we're going to zoom back out and talk about some general principles here. So the process of integrated pest management, and this process can be applied in one corner of a kitchen or thinking about your whole school facility. The first step is to inspect and monitor, and there's tools and strategies to how to do that effectively. Once you find something, whether it be a pest itself or an evidence of a pest, you want to identify that problem so that you can focus your efforts depending on what kind of pest that was. You want to make a plan, which includes exactly where you're going to be doing your efforts, what the scale of those efforts is going to be, and managing the expectations of all the people involved, which could be your whole school team, depending on what the problem is. And then you're going to respond. And I often get the question, why is it called integrated pest management? And for me, the answer to that is that you've got this whole toolbox of all the different tools we can use to impact how pests can't thrive in an area, and we integrate all of those tools that are appropriate for this scenario. So it's really important to know all the tools available to you to battle pests and how to use each one of them effectively. And then finally, once you've responded with that integrated approach, you evaluate the effectiveness of what you did, and the way you did that is go back to step number one. You're inspecting and monitoring. So, in fact, if you have a thriving integrated pest management program, a wildly successful program, you inspect and monitor, and you don't find anything. There's nothing to identify. There's no plan to make. There's no response to be had. So you just service your monitors, make sure everything's, your surveillance program is still working, and you check again in another week. So the ideal integrated pest management program is just inspect and monitor, inspect and monitor, inspect and monitor. That is the ultimate evidence of a thriving pest management program. But often there is something to identify, whether it be a pest or a pest-conducive condition, which is what we're going to get into next. Some tools to have on hand to do a thorough inspection, regardless of whether you're the pest management professional that's hired to do an inspection, or a IPM coordinator, or a teacher, or custodian, or kitchen staff who's responsible for doing thorough cleaning at the end of the day. A bright flashlight is probably the #1 most important tool you've got to have. You cannot do an integrated pest management or any pest management inspection without a bright flashlight, and you'll start to see some of the areas that it helps you see. If the photo of the PMP inspecting in the lower right corner doesn't give you any indication. Knee pads, again, you're going to have to get down and look in the area where pests are. So save your knees, do yourself a favor, and get some good knee pads. Gloves, because we are working in perhaps unsanitary conditions. A screwdriver for moving drain plates and other items so you can inspect behind them. And then a selfie stick or an inspection mirror. And the tip there is these inspection mirrors, there's a picture of one there on the right, allow you to see behind and underneath large objects like a refrigerator without moving them. And the selfie stick with a smartphone is just a new age version of that inspection mirror where you can put it over the top, take a picture with a flash, and see the scary things that are going on behind that refrigerator or that large heavy piece of machinery. Insect monitors are those sticky traps, and there's all sorts of different kinds of monitors available depending on what pests you're focusing on. And then a hand lens or containers for samples, so you can do that second step in IPM, which is identification. Where to inspect? If you can see it in this picture, it's probably not the exact spot where you need to be inspecting. You need to be inspecting behind, underneath, above, really not where the places that are out in the open. So if you do your inspection simply by walking around and never getting down on the ground, it's not going to be thorough enough to find problems before they get bad and they spread. If there are mice and cockroaches running across the table, all the good hiding spots are already filled up. Identification, some tips that are available or some tools that are available to you. Certainly your pest management professional can answer questions and identify samples that you may have saved. Most universities have a diagnostic lab that can be used for insect identification. And of course training and experience, and there's lots of online tools. For example, the National Pest Management Association has a field guide app that you can download on your phone that allows you to tap on the pests that you found and get more information. So there's lots of tools like that available, and I really encourage someone who's involved with pest management and in the school every day to have access to some way of identifying and getting some questions answered. Back to the IPM process, we've kind of talked through the inspection and monitoring and the identification. We're not going to go deep into making a plan because that's very site-specific, but now I'm going to zoom in on some of the non-chemical control aspects of your response. Cleaning. Number one, cleaning. And this photo credit goes to Marsha Anderson, who put this webinar together. And she had a great story, and there's a blog available that she may post in the comments of her experience going in and inspecting a school that closed up at the end of the school year, and no one went in the kitchen for 3 months. And it's an interesting question. If you left your kitchen as it is right now, either at home or at school, for 3 months and came back, would you find pests? And in this case, they found a raging German cockroach infestation because there hadn't been a thorough cleaning done before it was left. So pests love grease and certainly cockroaches, and no surprise, they left this building abandoned for 3 months, and the pests took care of the cleaning for them, shall we say. Another area are pipe chases, and you'll see me using my bright flashlight to point out areas that pests are going to use as runways in and out of the wall void. Escutcheon plates, the photo all the way to the left is of them being used well, where they're flush with the wall and sealed there. And then the photo that's one over from the left is often what we see. And someone put one of those escutcheon plates on, but never pressed it against the wall and sealed it there. So it's just kind of hanging there like an ornament. Don't spend your money on these things if you're not going to have them used and put in place. So manage your contractors who are installing these things. And if you put a hole in a wall, you're going to need to address the void or the gap around the pipe. Mats, I think our next presenter talking about flies is going to go into this one, but certainly pick them up, make sure they get dried out and cleaned thoroughly underneath it. This is a really common source for small fly breeding. The sealant around your refrigerator and freezer doors, another area where gunk and grime can build up, and subsequently pests will come in and treat it like a buffet. Drains. Drains are a huge issue, and inspectable and cleanable are the words that you want to keep in mind when you're thinking about your drains. Are they easy to inspect? Can you remove whatever's covering them to inspect inside and clean them? The photo in the middle is a fine example of this being done horribly, Someone put a large chest freezer that it would take a forklift to move right on top of that drain. That drain cover is never getting removed. So who knows what's going to happen in there. The photo on the top in the middle there is another example. All those pipes going in, the chances of being able to do a thorough inspection and cleaning in that trap there are pretty minimal. So as you're building your kitchens and thinking about how you're going to position drains, make sure they are inspectable and cleanable. Drop ceilings. Just because we can't see what's up there doesn't mean pests can't. Chances are it's a rodent highway going on up there. So consider drop ceilings in your pest management program as pest vulnerable areas. And perhaps you have some food equipment that gets used once a month, once a year, and then it's put away in storage for the remainder of the year. Make sure those things get thoroughly cleaned before being put away into storage, because they can have that 3-month scenario happen where they get abandoned, and even a little crumb can happily feed a cockroach. Doors, common theme. Every IPM presentation you get is probably going to talk about doors somehow. The picture on the left is evidencing some gaps that could be filled up with door sweeps and other tools like that, proper installation of the doors. And a nice trick there is shut off your lights on the interior, and if it's an exterior door, then let the sunshine come through. If it's not an interior door, have someone stand on the other side with a flashlight. And if you can see light shining through, there's probably some exclusion that can be done to block pests out. And the picture on the right is a good case of cultural control opportunity, meaning changing people's behavior. If a door gets propped open, it's not functioning as a door. So if there is, for example, a door coming off of your cafeteria and the dumpsters are right outside and that door tends to get propped open during the day, you're going to have problems. And the solution to those problems is in simply shutting the door. Dumpsters, another common theme. I think Mark covered it well, so I'm not going to dwell on this. Inspectable, cleanable, and placed on a cement pad at least 30 feet away from your building, so that you're not, any pests that are attracted to the dumpsters don't happen to wander into your school. Some cleaning challenges that you're going to have to educate your cleaning folks on how to do well with pest management in mind. Ovens, stoves, fryers, and the ventilation screens above them. You're going to want to make sure that those things get cleaned regularly in a detailed way so that they don't serve as food sources for pests. Drink dispensers, Mark talked about the ants and how the sugary drink, I think he showed Capri Sun. Well, drink dispensers are sugary drinks. Ants are going to love that, so make sure they get cleaned thoroughly. Drains, floor mats, mops, making sure that wet mops don't get stored on the floor with the heads down. That can be a source for flies. The picture that's on the left there, that's actually of the inside of a wet vac that was being used in a kitchen environment, and all those little white marks are fly larvae in the filter of the vacuum, and it's because the vacuum never got cleaned itself and was left wet, and it became the source of a fly problem. So even our cleaning materials can become, or our cleaning tools can become the source of our pest problems. Drop ceilings, I've mentioned, garbage cans, dumpsters. Again, if you're hearing repetition here, there's a reason. These are common areas that you need to focus on. And then every entomologist and pest management professional's favorite topic, the back leg zone. So underneath your large fixtures and your kitchen equipment, that back leg zone. Is your cleaning routine addressing that area? Are you inspecting back there? If not, I guarantee you the pests will. So get down with a flashlight and check out that back leg zone in your inspection. When you're thinking about food storage, that's another area that is pest vulnerable, especially for our stored product pests. You want to inspect items at delivery to make sure they're not arriving infested. You can look for debris from the pests themselves, or any damage to the packaging of the product will hint at you that either you want to reject it or look more carefully and really make sure your monitoring is in place in the food storage area. the first in, first out protocol that ensures that food product is not left in storage any longer than it has to be. Setting up your storage areas to be inspectable and cleanable. The picture to the right is so close to getting it right, but they didn't. Someone used the strategy that you will often see of painting a white strip on the ground about a foot out from the wall and making it known to folks that any food storage needs to happen outside of that white area. That ensures that you can inspect along the wall and you can place any monitoring devices that you need to place along the wall. And so they had the right idea here, but whoever set up the shelves went ahead and put it right in that white zone. So that's a fun strategy that can work, but again, it takes educating people on why you put white paint on the floor and what is it for. Excluding pests, we're going to get to in a moment, some more specific exclusion tactics, and then monitoring food storage areas, and especially, again, for those stored product pests, there's pheromone traps you can use as monitors and ways you can have your surveillance program to catch the early onset of pests in these food storage areas. Don't forget pests need shelter and a way in, so minimize that. One of the other things about this photo that's not ideal is the cardboard boxes. Basically think of cardboard boxes like little pest hotels. So the less cardboard you can have in your storage areas and anywhere related to food, the better. Pest vulnerable areas are, in summary, hard to reach, hard to see, hard to clean, open to the outside, or open to avoid. There's your little checklist for looking at areas and trying to determine whether it is a pest vulnerable area. For exclusion tips, this is a short link and it's going to be on the resource slide that will be within this presentation so you can access this. This is a PDF called Pest Prevention by Design that was done out of the San Francisco Department of the Environment with funding from the CDC. And actually EPA did a Pest Prevention by Design in Schools webinar, and the link is there. This PDF goes through the exact exclusion tools and strategies you need. So if you've got a maintenance crew and folks who are actually going to be doing the exclusion to seal out the pests, make sure they have this document in hand and can go in and answer the question, you know, if I want to put a screen in front of this vent, what gauge mesh should I be using to make sure I keep flies out? That is the level of detail that this document goes into. In this presentation, we don't have time to go through all those strategies, so get yourself a copy of this Pest Prevention by Design document, which I believe is also one of the downloads available with this presentation, and pour through it for those really specific exclusion practices. And as kind of a final shout out, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. Even documentation of no pests found is really important to know in order to see the trends and then analyze the success of your pest management program or identifying areas of your kitchen or cafeteria that are prone to pests and infestations keep occurring. So if you didn't document it, it didn't happen, and think through all of the individuals who might be involved in an area and how they have an opportunity to document what they do and see. Again, the resources will be available in this presentation, and following you can download them. And with that, I'll pass it on to the next presenter.
Wow. Thank you, Allie, for such a well-rounded presentation on proper IPM steps to control pests in kitchens and for all of the great resources. Next, we would like Carrie Winbiel-Rojas from the University of California to discuss some of the tiniest yet most annoying of kitchen pests, small flies. Carrie, the mic's all yours.
Thank you so much, Marcia, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you all today. I will sort of reiterate what Allie said about there being some redundancy throughout our presentations with some of these, sanitation and cultural and other practices for managing not just flies but other pests as well. So I will be a little redundant, but hopefully not too badly so. But really, the more we hear it, I think the better it will stick in our heads that, this is just something we need to do, and we'll thank ourselves later for it, for reducing our pest pressure. Okay, so first, so I'm going to talk about small flies. There are several types of flies that can be found in and around school kitchens and cafeterias, especially as we get into the warmer days here. But the ones I will focus on for today's talk are the small flies, specifically moth or drain flies in the family Psychodidae, phorid flies, which are sometimes called humpback flies, and there's other frequent common names too, in the family Phoridae, and fruit flies, and those are in the family Drosophilidae, with Drosophila being the major genus. So, as I'm sure most of you know, but I want to give a little backup on fly development. Flies belong to the insect order Diptera, and they undergo complete metamorphosis, with their life cycle involving an egg, larva, pupal, and adult stage. Some flies are scavengers, and they feed only as adults and as larvae. Allie showed us those great close-up photos of the fly mouth parts, and as she said, flies have sponging mouth parts, so they take in only liquid food, as do the larvae, and they typically need to put their sponging mouth parts on the surface to dissolve solids through their saliva, regurgitating their stomach contents and sucking it back up. So that is how these flies, many flies and the small flies feed, which is important to understanding the substrate which they'll be developing in and why they might be there. So of the flies we're discussing today, none of them bite, but they can definitely be a nuisance around kitchens and cafeterias, particularly when their numbers are high. And while we commonly find the adult flies to be the most bothersome life stage, the larval stage is really the best target for management efforts through the elimination of the habitat. We need to remove the material where the larvae are developing so that the fly life cycle can be broken, and this will greatly reduce subsequent production of adult flies and the nuisance that they cause. All right, so flies do play an important role as decomposers in our natural environment, breaking down all kinds of organic decaying material, but they also pose a threat to human health, and in the school environment, they really need to be managed. As we'll discuss and as you've heard already, small flies breed in wet and sort of filthy drains and on fruit and in these conditions in the school kitchens, and they can carry bacteria on their bodies, transferring disease in the food handling, food prep, food consumption areas where the children are eating. Fruit flies in particular can transmit bacteria and fungi from infected fruit to uninfected fruit, which causes early spoilage of some of the produce in kitchens. And then, as I mentioned, in high numbers, they can be a nuisance pest, but body parts, especially with a large fly infestation, they can fly into food in the prep areas, and their body parts can contaminate the food. And with a particular fly, the moth fly, it can also lead to some kind of reaction by some folks as far as triggering asthma. So to get into the first of our three flies, moth flies. Moth flies are also called drain flies, sewer flies, or filter flies. They are about 1/8 inch long as adults and are typically light brown to brownish gray or black in color. Their wings are covered with really fine hairs, and so is their body, giving them a really fuzzy moth-like appearance, hence the name. These flies rest on surfaces with their wings held over their back in a kind of roof-like manner, and they have wing veins that extend in a parallel arrangement from the base of their wingtip, which you can somewhat see in these photos here, from the base of the wingtip to their bodies. The wing pattern of these parallel lines is unique to the Psychodidae family of flies, and so these flies are pretty easy to distinguish from other flies. Moth flies are also weak flyers and exhibit a characteristic short hopping behavior between flights. And so, as I said, these characteristics together make it very easy to distinguish them, both in kitchens but also in homes and other buildings where they might be common. So the female moth fly lays eggs in areas where there is decaying organic material, which could include in school kitchens, drains, garbage disposals, grease traps, sewage, pretty much anywhere where there is organic material, very wet organic material. The eggs hatch in about 48 hours and continue to develop in this very wet environment as larvae. The larvae feed on bacterial mats and decaying organic matter, and they have pretty strong jaws that can break through some of these mats quite well. The life cycle of moth flies can be completed in as little as 8 days, but it may take as much as 24 days depending on the temperature. Adult drain flies can carry bacteria and other microorganisms from these high organic and sometimes filthy egg-laying sites to food in the food themselves, but also in the food prep and food contact surfaces. Because the adults are poor flyers, the adults are often found near the breeding sites where you can often find the larvae, and the adults rest on walls and other surfaces, especially near windows and other sources of light. So to move to fruit flies, this is another very common small fly present in school kitchens and cafeterias. The fruit flies belong to the family Drosophilidae, and the one that we most commonly see is the Drosophila melanogaster, which, as you can see in this upper right picture, has these bright red eyes. Fruit flies are also termed pomace or vinegar flies, and they can sometimes be confused with other small flies, especially the phorid or humpback flies, which I'll cover next. The main difference is that fruit flies have these red eyes, and also they are usually found hovering over their food source, which is ripe produce, and I'll get into that in a second. Fruit flies are small, usually yellow to brown, and they are stocky, about 1/10 of an inch long. They have red eyes, as I mentioned, and the larvae are small white legless maggots that grow to be about 1/5 an inch long, and there's a picture, a nice juicy picture of a maggot right there in the lower right. Females lay large numbers of eggs on fruit, and the larvae feed on fruit in the very sort of liquid decaying manner. Females can lay quite a large number of eggs, 500 to 700 eggs in a 25 to 30 day lifespan. So they can build up quite quickly. Fruit flies are active during periods of warm weather, although you can see them in winter months, but warmer weather especially, and with the warmer temperatures, a single generation can develop in as little as a week when temperatures are high. So as I already mentioned, and their name implies, fruit fly adults are attracted to ripe and overripe fruit, vegetables, fermenting liquids, juices, other such foods. The females, as I said, do lay large numbers of eggs, so populations in kitchens and schools can build up very, very quickly. Large numbers of fruit flies can be an indication of unsanitary conditions, like we've seen with the presenters already, and I'll describe in detail a bit more. And this could include spilled or spoiled fruit in the food prep area or even out in the cafeteria, poorly maintained garbage containers that are either dirty or have fresh fruit or vegetable material in them, accumulation of organic material around the drains and tiles, especially in the grout and areas where the tile is broken, and wet areas on the floor or under equipment, behind equipment, any number of places where you might have any of their food material. They can build up and start to reproduce very, very rapidly. Moving on quickly to phorid flies, this is another very common fly that's found on organic materials. The family Phoridae is a large insect family with more than 3,500 species worldwide. They are commonly referred to also as humpback flies, coffin flies, and scuttle flies. They are very small flies, reaching up to about 1/8 of an inch long, but they can be smaller. And they are recognized and also called humpback flies because they have a very distinct hump on their thorax, as you can sort of make out in the picture. And their hind femurs are enlarged on their legs, and they have a very reduced veins in the wings with no cross veins, as you can see in the drawing. Forward flies are similar in size to fruit flies, and as I mentioned already, they're often mistaken for them, except that forward flies do not have red eyes at quick glance. Forward flies move across surfaces oftentimes by walking instead of flying, and they move in a very quick sort of darting, jerky motion, which lends to one of their other names of the scuttle fly. They kind of scuttle around. As far as the food that forward flies live and breed on, they breed in very wet areas containing decaying organic matter, which can include drains, garbage area, dirty mop heads either on the floor or hanging up or left in the bucket, in the cracked floor tiles, under the bases of kitchen equipment, wherever there is organic material that's also kept wet. They may be found in broken sewage lines, especially if there's a heavy and ongoing infestation. That might be something that needs to be looked into. And as I said already, they're also called coffin flies because forward flies also feed on decaying animal carcasses, which could, if you're finding them in large numbers, could mean that there might be an animal carcass somewhere that needs to be found and cleaned up. But forward flies can also be significant pests in and around cemeteries and mausoleums. So sometimes they are also called mausoleum flies. I think Mark mentioned them. Females can lay up to 750 eggs in her lifetime, and she lays her eggs on the moist organic material. The larvae will emerge in about 24 hours and feed for a week to 16 days or so, and then will pupate. Their life cycle can be as short as 14 days, but can take up to 37 days. And again, this depends on the temperature. So they can also build up very quickly when you have the proper area for them to breed in. So as both Mark and Allie already discussed, some general IPM for any pest, but in particular for flies, will include good inspection and prevention for potential pest-prone sites, and this needs to be at the top of any school IPM program. If adult flies are present in the kitchen, the food prep areas, the cafeteria, examining drains and any wet areas and other breeding sites that were already mentioned by myself or the other presenters, you really need to eliminate the conditions that are fostering these flies. The best management options include modifying the habitats or cultural controls, as we've heard already, and some of the physical and mechanical controls to keep the flies out of the kitchen, away from the food, away from the cafeteria. Controlling adult flies with insecticidal sprays and traps are only temporary, and I'll get into each one of these a bit more in just a moment. So as has already been mentioned, sanitation is really critical for pests in general and for flies in particular, reducing the potential source of this organic matter that these flies need in order to reproduce. So employees can look and clean up areas where these food residues, this organic buildup, and water can accumulate. The key locations can include the underside of prep counters, around kitchen equipment, around fixtures, the floor mats, as Allie showed a picture of earlier, cleaning those out, hanging them up at the end of the day so that they can dry out so they're not holding the water on the floor and in all of these little crevices. Eliminating other breeding sites by sealing up cracks, edges around the coving, tiles, and those back legs that Allie mentioned, and shop vacs. That was a great picture. Any spilled food and drink should be cleaned up immediately. Mark talked about using liners for waste containers, which will keep the bins clean so that organic material and debris does not build up on the bins. And any spills or any material that does get on the trash cans need to be cleaned daily, and of course the trashes should be emptied daily and the bags sealed before throwing them into the dumpster. Mark showed the dumpster picture with the recycled materials, but inside the kitchen, any recycled materials that may be kept there for a little bit or even outside need to be rinsed out before placing them in the recycle bin so that they are free of material that may be attracting these small flies, and they should not be stored for more than a week. More cultural controls for small flies include inspecting fruit and vegetables when they come into the kitchen, when they are delivered, looking for the presence of fruit flies, looking for larvae if they can be seen, or adults, but disposing of any unripe fruit, vegetables, other materials that have the potential to be harboring pests. And if these fruits and vegetables cannot be inspected right away, they should be stored in plastic bins, not in cardboard, in a cold storage room so that they can be more closely inspected later. But the overripe produce really does need to be disposed of, and any existing material cold and gotten rid of before the adults can be seen, because they may be harboring eggs, which are very hard to see, and larvae. So cleaning drains, traps, strainers at least twice a week, eliminating these residues that can encourage the fly development, and being sure that all P-traps are kept full of water to prevent insects in the sewage system from entering the building through the floor drains. These are kinds of practices that, general sanitation will prevent potential pest problems. A lot of this was mentioned already, but physical and mechanical controls are very important. Repairing plumbing leaks and ensuring that no standing water is in the food prep areas, maintaining positive air pressure, screens, and good ventilation, installing door sweeps, yes, doors, or stripper air curtains over the exterior surfaces to the kitchen areas so that flies cannot get in. And then other kinds of physical barriers to inhibit any kind of sewer gas or sewage or entry from other pests. Outside the building, Mark and Allie, I think, both mentioned this already, but placing trash cans and recycle bins and dumpsters at least 50 feet from the kitchen entry areas is important to limit the movement of these flies from outdoors in. Checking any sewage repair lines and getting them fixed. And then adult flies can be trapped using some non-toxic fly traps, or you can make traps baited with vinegar or juice or soft drinks as a way to sort of supplement the sanitation, but traps should not be needed as an ongoing method of fly control if all of the other sanitation measures and physical controls are adhered to. For cleaning drains, bacterial or enzymatic drain cleaner, followed by very hot water and scrubbing with a stiff brush. This will get rid of some of the buildup in the drains, reducing that organic material for fly development. And then using microbial drain and surface cleaners to remove the residues from the floors, from coving in between the tiles, fixtures, anywhere that there's potentially going to be harborage sites. And some of the foam-based formulations are quite effective for some of the harder to reach areas. For chemical control, pesticide options have a limited value, and they're not usually required for the management of small flies in kitchens. Sometimes pesticides will knock down the adult fruit flies or break the cycle from adult to egg laying, but it won't provide long-term control if these other sanitation methods are not adhered to. And sometimes the source of the flies is really hard to find, so the insecticides may be warranted until a source can be found. So spot treating may be useful with an insecticide if necessary, but for any pesticide, any chemical that is used, it should be made by a licensed professional and according to label directions. And with that, I thank you all very much. There are many different resources that Allie mentioned, and here are a couple other sources, and that is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie, for sharing with us the world of small flies in kitchens. And thanks to Mark and Allison for your interesting and informative presentations. We hope that you'll join us on April 11th when we discuss numerous strategies to reduce unsightly and troublesome weeds on your school's grounds. To help us improve future webinars, we ask that you complete a brief online evaluation. A link will be emailed to you at the conclusion of our webinar, and upon submission, you'll be provided a link to your certificate of participation. We'll now turn to your questions. Please post any additional questions at this time. In a few weeks, a document with the questions and answers will be provided on our website. We'll also provide links to additional resources and a recording of today's program. At this point, I'm going to turn the mic over to Thomas Cook from the Center of Expertise for School IPM, who will moderate the question and answer session. Thomas, mic's all yours.
Thank you, Marcia. Okay, we have a few questions coming in already, and I'm going to pose the first question to Carrie. Carrie, this question for you is, my pest control company wants me to install insect light traps in my kitchen. Is this an effective way to solve fly problems?
Thank you, Thomas. Installing light traps are good for monitoring and also catching some flies, but as I mentioned, without fixing the possible breeding habitats and minimizing the organic matter that may be built up, the fly traps are only going to be one small aspect of fly control. So it really comes down to cleaning the drains, eliminating the breeding sites, and finding out the source of why the flies are continuing to occur in the kitchen. I don't know if Allie or Mark have some other thoughts on that as well.
This is Allie. I would just say that the quick answer is yes, have insect light traps, but make sure they're placed properly so they're not attracting flies to food prep areas or food serving areas. But having monitors is really important. So it's not going to impact your ultimate control, but it's going to inform your control strategies and catch any fly problems or let you know about fly problems before they grow and spread. Once you've identified the flies with the use of that insect light trap, then you're going to need to focus your efforts on the sanitation efforts or the sanitation issues that Carrie presented.
Thank you. Allie, this next question is for you. Allie, how often should kitchen and custodial staff be inspecting between the pest control company's visits?
I would train the kitchen and custodial staff to think about pest management in their daily routine and whenever they're cleaning. So when they're cleaning, that's an opportunity for inspecting. They should be cleaning in that back leg zone and thus also inspecting. And if through the course of their daily cleaning routine or putting away food, they are near an insect monitor, they can just take a peek at it, and if they see pests in that monitor, to call and let the pest management professional know, or put that in whatever documentation system that your school has in place. So I would say daily, and It doesn't need to be a separate thing from what they're already doing. They should just be doing their cleaning and going about their job responsibilities, thinking like a pest and thinking about the implications of what they're doing, what the implications are on pest management.
Okay, thank you. Mark, this question's for you. We have a bad yellow jacket population that hangs around our dumpsters. It is so bad, especially in the fall months, that our kitchen staff resorts to throwing the bags into the dumpster. Often the bags split open. What should we do?
Well, thanks for the question. Obviously, the biggest problem you have is that the food is accessible to the yellow jackets. What we do first is we make sure that the cans are clean. You can have your company change out the cans so that if there's an issue with the materials they use to clean them, and bring you a clean dumpster. That's the first step. Making sure those bags stay closed is the second step. And the third thing, which I hesitate to say this because a lot of people like to use the yellow jacket traps as a real control method, but they don't really work that way. But if you know the direction and you can actually watch a beeline, you can stand and watch your yellow jackets fly into your dumpster and then back out and see where they're flying. You can place some of those yellow jacket traps on trees away from the dumpsters and actually capture some of the incoming yellow jackets. If you do those three things, and then the ultimate is to actually locate the nests and to remove the nests, you'll get a reduction and even an elimination of the problem.
Thank you, sir. Carrie, this question is for you. Do you work closely with your local health department in implementing your IPM strategy or your plan?
Well, in California, the structure is a little bit different. The California Department of Pesticide Regulation actually manages the school IPM program. So I can't actually answer for that because we, at the UC statewide IPM program, we work with other audiences, other urban audiences. So I do believe that the school IPM program in California does work with the local public health, but I can't answer that for sure.
Okay. Thank you. Carrie, actually, we're going to follow with another question to you. You mentioned fruit fly sticky strips. Where should we place them in the kitchen where they would be both effective yet out of the way?
Well, they would be well placed in areas where the food might be, the food prep areas, not getting in the way of any food prep areas, but where food may be stored to catch any produce, especially when the produce is sitting there and you want to monitor for the fruit flies. So nearby where the food is kept, and that can give you a quick indication. If you're finding adults, then maybe some further inspection might be needed. I don't think that they need to really be placed all over the kitchen, but that's mostly our recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Allie, this question is for you. I understand about installing door sweeps under outer doors to keep pests out, but what is a practical solution to close the gap between two exterior doors?
There is a, I'm trying to remember, I'm blanking on the term for that space, but there are sealant options for that space on a door, and that pest prevention by design document does go into that. So you can search the PDF by typing or pressing Control-F and just search doors, and you'll get to some of the specific product recommendations around doing exclusion around doors, both underneath with the door sweeps and that spot in between the two doors. And if one of the other speakers isn't having a blank, or I know there's a lot of experts who are attending and can put in the chat box. Feel free if you're not blanking on that term.
Mark or Carrie, did you guys want to add any input to that?
This is Mark. I would like to just add that there are some door sweeps that have been made now that are actually an L shape. And so they do help with that gap in that you can have that center area covered with the same material. And I really think we should be using brush door sweeps. The rubber sweeps will bend, they'll wear out, they get chewed through by rodents. But if you're using a brush sweep, you can eliminate part of that center area with an L-shaped brace, which is available from at least one company I know of. Other than that, there actually are some door designs that make it very difficult. Some of the middle hinge doors that are double doors makes it very difficult to get a good seal on that gap, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you, sir. Carrie, this question is for you. We have air curtains installed on our exterior doors. How do I know if they are working properly?
Well, if they're doing what they should be doing, if you're having continual fly or other pest problems, then perhaps they need to be inspected or considering a different kind of air screen. I think if you're not really having problems, then they're working great. But if you continue to see flies coming in, especially if they're not, fruit flies and they're coming in by flying, then they may not be working very well. So you can get a professional to come and have a look at them, maybe considering a different brand even.
Okay, thank you. Allie, this question's for you. We've been told that pouring bleach down the floor drain will help control drain flies. Sounds like the drain should be clean, not sanitized. Is that correct?
You got it. Yeah, just sanitizing the scum is not going to do it. You want to address the issue and really make sure that those drains get cleaned, and there's good resources on cleaning versus sanitation and really getting in there and removing the gunk. So good job in getting that out of the presentation.
Yeah, and this is Carrie. I will add absolutely that the bleach just does not break down the built up gunk that's in the drain. So it might kill some of the larvae. It might get rid of some of it, but if there's still a lot of organic matter, the bleach isn't good enough to take care of everything. So, getting a different kind of cleaner and scrubbing it is what might be needed.
Okay, thank you. Mark, this question's for you. How often do you inspect and change monitors in the kitchen food service area?
We have a contractor. We have a contractor at our system, and they come out at a minimum monthly to inspect the monitors they place. We also have an IEQ program now where staff are inspecting once a month. So, roughly every 2 weeks, it's somebody's official duty to inspect those monitors. But as was said earlier, people are going to be seeing those monitors daily, and if they see something in them, they're going to report it. And it's really a training issue to make sure that the staff know what to report, know who to report it to, and that the information gets back to you. The quicker that can happen, the better chance you're going to be able to solve that issue.
Sir. Carrie, this is for you. Is there something we can spray or apply to kill fruit flies that constantly hang around the kitchen sinks?
I would really discourage any kind of spraying anything for fruit flies. If any spray is to be applied, it should be done by a professional. But I think getting rid of the source of the material that's attracting the fruit flies is the best way to go. putting up some fly traps would be good, but really they are there because there is a food source, and so there might be something that can be sprayed to sort of knock down the adults, but it kind of depends on who the question's from. If it's from a professional or from a kitchen staff, because we really think that any kind of chemical should be applied by licensed professionals.
Okay, thanks. Carrie, you touched on this in your presentation, but follow up on with this question to you. How do fruit and forward flies get into my kitchen to begin with?
The adults of both can fly fairly well. So, they come in. Fruit flies are attracted to the sort of fermenting or overripe fruit, and so they will be attracted to it coming in through vents or doors and windows, the open doors that both of the presenters mentioned. They can come in, fruit flies especially can come in with the produce as eggs or larvae. So they can fly in, but they can come in with the fruit itself. And once there's a food source or a good breeding site, then they will continue to build up in numbers until something is done. Forward flies as well, they can fly in through the vents and open doors, and they will be attracted to the organic material. So they can breed in the garbage cans and the dumpsters and the drains and the sewage pipes, and there's many different ways that these flies can get in to the building.
Thank you. I'll pose this to the group. Can someone talk about the relationship on the health inspectors and the food service areas? Have any of you ever had an issue with monitoring stations in the kitchen areas and health inspectors concerned about them in the food area?
This is Mark. I can address that in a brief way. Occasionally we have inspectors that come in and they will find a trap that we place for monitoring, and it'll have an insect in it. And because we have a requirement for IPM in schools in our state, they also know that we're not going to be out there spraying the next day. That we're going to go through our routine and we're going to find the source and eliminate it. So what they really require of us at that point is that we get our IPM contractor or staff out there and inspect and provide them with a report. And that's sufficient, at least in our situation, for them to not write us up for pests in the kitchen. That's a really good relationship to have. Now, I'm not sure if other states have that or not, but they have a set of rules and we have a set of rules, and I can see in some areas that could be in conflict. For us, it's not.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And last question, I'll pose this to Allie. Allie, are there any low-cost, non-pesticide ways to prevent stored food pests?
That's a tough one. Prevention, when you think about our food supply chain, there's just so many opportunities for the stored product pests to infest, and in fact they are the stored product pests themselves. For example, an Indian meal moth, they're just super machines at detecting potential food sources and breeding sites. So think about that truck just sitting outside of your school waiting to be unloaded. Pests could be trying to get into the bed of that truck. So there's so many opportunities for infestation that it's hard to truly have a complete prevention of those. So I think the way to rest easy at night is make sure you have lots of monitoring available and some pheromone traps up there, which in order to monitor the pheromone traps can disrupt their ability to find the food and confuse them and capture them. So in that case, it could be preventative in that the one pest that's trying to find something to lay eggs on would get distracted and fall into that monitoring. But Vigilant surveillance at all times. You're never going to be able to kind of set it and forget it with stored product pests. I would really emphasize inspecting items and training folks who unload products and put them in storage areas to what to keep an eye out for and what damage to be looking for in order to not introduce those pests. Preventing introduction is probably your best bet in preventing stored product pests.
Allie, thank you so much. Thank you to the presenters. Marcia, that concludes the Q&A session. Marcia, you can close it out. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining today, and look forward to the presentation and the questions and answers, which will eventually be up on our website. So at this point, we're done, and I'd like to say goodbye.